If you're listening to this and thinking, nothing in my life makes sense anymore, good. That confusion is not an accident. This stage was never designed to comfort you. It was designed to strip you, to remove the versions of you that were too dependent, too attached, too easily shaken. Most people think breaking means failure. That's lazy thinking. Breaking is what happens when something false can no longer survive pressure. What feels like collapse is actually separation. You are not being punished. You are being refined. And only a very small number of people are pushed into a stage like this. Not because they are weak, but because they can endure what others cannot. I'm going to be direct, because soft language would dilute the point. This stage exists for one reason: to expose the gap between who you are and who you've been performing as before real growth ever happens. There is always exposure, not public exposure. Internal exposure, the kind where the story you've been telling yourself starts falling apart. This stage doesn't attack your core, it attacks your image, and that's why it feels so personal. You're not being wounded at the root, you're being stripped at the surface. Most people don't realize how much of their personality is a survival strategy. The way you spoke, the way you acted, the way you stayed agreeable, strong, funny, helpful, or emotionally unavailable. Those weren't random traits. They were adaptations. You learned them to stay accepted, to avoid rejection, to feel safe in environments where being fully yourself felt risky. Over time, those adaptations hardened into identity. You didn't just use the mask, you became it. That's why this stage hurts the way it does. When the roles collapse, it feels like you're disappearing. The approval stops. The attention fades. The reactions you relied on no longer come. Suddenly the version of you that used to work doesn't work anymore, and your mind panics. It calls this loss. It calls this failure. It calls this regression. But none of that is accurate. What's actually happening is that life is removing what was never structurally sound. Anything that depends on applause, validation, usefulness, or performance is fragile by design. It can't survive pressure. It can't carry you forward into a bigger life. So this stage applies force until the weak parts crack, not to humiliate you, but to reveal the truth. If something can be taken from you, it was never your foundation. That realization is brutal, because it forces you to confront how much of your confidence was outsourced, how often you measured your worth through reactions, how dependent you became on being seen a certain way. When that mirror disappears, you're left alone with yourself for the first time. No role, no script, no audience, just you. And that silence is terrifying to people who have never met themselves without a mask. This is why many people try to escape this stage. They rush to rebuild a new image instead of letting the old one die. They grab another label, another identity, another version that will earn approval quickly. But that only delays the process. The stage doesn't end until the pretending ends. You cannot skip this part by dressing it up. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people avoid you identified with the mask because it protected you. Letting it go feels like standing exposed in the open, vulnerable, undefined, unimpressive. But that emptiness is not the absence of self, it's the clearing of false structure. This is the part where the real work begins. That is the part where the real work begins. Not building a better image, but building a stronger core. Not asking, how do I look, but asking, what actually remains when nothing is being performed? That question is heavy. It demands honesty. It demands patience. It demands the humility to admit that parts of your identity were borrowed, not earned. And once you accept that, something shifts. You stop trying to salvage the old version. You stop defending it. You stop explaining yourself to people who only knew the mask. You allow the collapse to finish its job because you finally understand this stage is not destroying you. It's separating you from what you are not. When the pretending ends, you don't immediately feel stronger. You feel empty, quiet, uncertain. That's normal. Strength doesn't arrive as confidence. It arrives as stability, as self-trust, as the ability to exist without needing to be seen a certain way. And that kind of strength can't be faked. It can only be built after the mask is gone. This stage had to happen because the next version of you cannot be performed. It must be lived. True isolation is not abandonment. This is where most people get it wrong. And because they get it wrong, they suffer longer than necessary. You assume isolation means you've been rejected, forgotten, or left behind. That assumption is emotional, not logical. Isolation is not abandonment. It is extraction. You are being pulled out of environments, relationships, and feedback loops that kept you dependent instead of developed. Look closely at what disappeared in this stage. It wasn't random. It wasn't everyone. It was the noise. The people who needed you to stay predictable. The dynamics where you were only valued for what you provided. The conversations that distracted you from your own thoughts. Those things didn't leave because you failed. They left because they could not follow where this stage was taking you. Most people confuse connection with stability. They feel grounded only when others are around. When those people vanish, their nervous system panics. The mind calls it loneliness, but that's inaccurate. Loneliness is missing connection. What you're experiencing is the withdrawal from dependence, and withdrawal always feels uncomfortable before it feels clean. Isolation forces something most people avoid their entire lives: self-confrontation. When there is no one to reassure you, distract you, or reflect you back to yourself, you are forced to hear your own thoughts without interference. Your doubts get louder, your fears surface, your unresolved issues stop hiding. This isn't cruelty, this is exposure. The stage removes external regulation so you can build internal regulation. Here's the hard truth: if you cannot sit with yourself, you are not free. You are managed by distraction. People who fear isolation usually fear what comes up in silence. They've never developed inner authority, so they rely on external input to feel oriented. Isolation cuts that cord, and that's why it feels destabilizing. You are being trained to stand without leaning. This stage teaches you how much of your confidence came from proximity to others, how many decisions you deferred, how often you looked outward before looking inward. When that support system is removed, you either collapse or you grow roots. There is no middle ground. Isolation is where self-trust is built, not talked about. Without an audience, you stop performing. Without constant feedback, you stop adjusting yourself to be acceptable. You begin to notice your own rhythms, your own preferences, your own limits. For the first time, your life is not being negotiated socially. It is being examined privately. That's uncomfortable because it removes excuses. You can no longer blame others for your stagnation or your confusion. You can no longer hide behind group identity or borrowed confidence. Isolation places responsibility directly in your hands, and responsibility feels heavy to people who have never carried it alone. This is also why many people rush back into relationships, friendships, or distractions during this stage, not because they're healed, but because they're uncomfortable with clarity. Isolation sharpens perception. It exposes patterns. It forces you to notice what you tolerate, what you avoid, and what you actually want. Some people would rather stay busy than become honest. But if you stay in this stage instead of escaping it, something critical happens. You stop needing constant reassurance that you're on the right path. You learn to move without consensus. You learn to trust your own judgment, even when it isn't validated. That's not isolation as punishment. That's isolation as preparation. Every person who eventually leads, builds, or creates something meaningful passes through this phase. Because you cannot guide others if you've never learned to guide yourself. You cannot stand firm in chaos if you've never learned to stand alone in silence. This stage is not pushing you away from people forever. It is resetting your relationship to them. When you re-enter connection later, it will be from choice, not need, from stability, not hunger, from clarity, not confusion. Isolation is not abandonment. It is alignment without interference. And if you endure it without running, you come out internally anchored in a way that no crowd can give you. 3. The pressure reveals what you store built from. Pressure is not new to your life. What's new is that this pressure doesn't let up. There is no quick relief, no easy win, no external reset. That's intentional. Short bursts of stress test reaction. Sustained pressure tests structure. This stage is not asking how you respond in a moment. It is asking who you become when difficulty becomes normal. Most people fall apart here, not outwardly, but internally. They keep functioning, but something shuts down inside them. Discipline fades, standards lower, belief erodes quietly. They don't quit loudly, because quitting would require honesty. Instead, they numb themselves. They distract. They drift. From the outside, they look fine. Internally, they've surrendered. If you're still here, listening, reflecting, staying engaged with this process that matters more than you realize, pressure strips away emotional theatrics. It exposes habits, not intentions. Everyone says they are resilient when life is manageable. Pressure reveals whether that's true. It shows how you act when motivation disappears, how you treat yourself when no one is watching, whether your values hold when there's no reward attached. This stage presses on your weak points deliberately. Your patience is tested because impatience hides entitlement. Your discipline is tested because comfort hid inconsistency. Your emotional control is tested because stability was borrowed from circumstances, not built internally. Pressure finds these cracks and widens them until you're forced to address them. This is where people misunderstand what breaking really means. Breaking is not collapsing emotionally. Breaking is when old coping mechanisms stop working, when denial fails, when distraction loses its effect, when shortcuts no longer deliver relief. That's not failure, that's evolution. What cannot survive pressure does not deserve to survive the next stage of your life. Pressure also exposes illusions about strength. Many people think strength is intensity, loud confidence, aggression, endurance without rest. But pressure reveals that real strength is regulation, the ability to stay composed when nothing improves quickly, to keep routines when there's no motivation, to remain ethical when cutting corners would be easier. This stage trains that quietly, through repetition and resistance. It also teaches you something uncomfortable. Not everything improves with effort alone. You learn to stop forcing outcomes. You learn to distinguish between what you can control and what you must endure. That discernment only develops under pressure. Without it, people burn out or become bitter. With it, they become precise, calm, dangerous in the best sense of the word. Pressure does something else that most people don't talk about. It removes fantasy. It kills the idea that you are special without discipline, that things will eventually work out without structure, that intention is enough. Under pressure, excuses collapse. You see clearly where you've been inconsistent, where you've avoided responsibility, where you relied on hope instead of systems. That clarity is uncomfortable, but it sets clean. And here's the part most people miss. Pressure doesn't just reveal weakness, it reveals capacity. It shows you how much you can actually endure, how much you can carry without collapsing, how steady you can become when chaos doesn't leave. You start trusting yourself, not because life is easy, but because you've proven you can remain functional when it isn't. By the time this stage loosens its grip, you are no longer guessing who you are under stress. You know, you've seen it, you've lived it. Pressure didn't destroy you, it calibrated you. And what's calibrated under pressure doesn't fall apart when conditions change. 4. This phase breaks attachment, not you. What's actually breaking in this stage is not your life, your future, or your identity. It's your attachment to how things were supposed to go. And attachment is the most subtle source of suffering because it disguises itself as hope, loyalty, and patience. You didn't suffer because things ended. You suffered because you were attached to them. Continuing. Attachment is the insistence that reality obey your expectations. It's the quiet belief that if you invest enough, wait long enough, or endure enough, outcomes should reward you. This stage dismantles that belief by force, not cruelty, because attachment makes you fragile. It ties your emotional stability to conditions you cannot control. This phase removes your ability to cling. Plans unravel, people change, timelines collapse, doors close without explanation, and no amount of effort reopens them. That's not punishment. That's the system teaching you a boundary you refused to learn gently. When holding on hurts more than letting go, release becomes inevitable. Most people don't realize how attached they are until they're forced to detach. You were attached to being understood, to being appreciated for your effort, to things working out because you did the right thing, to the idea that endurance guarantees reward. This stage confronts those beliefs directly. It shows you that effort does not entitle you to outcomes. And while that truth feels harsh, it's liberating. Attachment keeps you reactive. When you're attached, every delay feels personal. Every loss feels like betrayal. Every change feels like threat. Your mood rises and falls based on external shifts. This stage breaks that dependency by removing the objects of attachment until you either adapt or collapse. And adaptation requires surrender, not resignation. Surrender is not giving up. It's releasing control over what you cannot command. This is where clarity enters. When attachment weakens, perception sharpens. You stop negotiating with reality and start cooperating with it. You stop asking why things happened and start asking what remains. That shift changes everything. Energy once wasted on resistance becomes available for precision and action. Detachment also dismantles emotional bargaining. You stop thinking, if I just hold on a little longer, it will change. You stop delaying acceptance. You stop building your life around maybes. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you grounded. Grounded people are not heartless. They're efficient. They don't bleed over outcomes that were never guaranteed. This phase teaches you how to stay present without gripping. You still care, you still invest, but you no longer collapse when things move in a different direction. You learn to walk forward without dragging the past behind you. That ability is not natural. It is trained through loss, frustration, and forced release. The irony is that once attachment breaks, life feels lighter, even if circumstances haven't improved yet. The suffering decreases before the situation changes. That's how you know the lesson is working. Freedom begins internally, not externally. This stage does not end when you get what you wanted. It ends when you no longer need it to feel stable. Attachment is what made you breakable. Detachment is what makes you durable, and this phase exists to build durability. 5. You are learning to move without validation. This stage removes something most people don't even realize they're addicted to: validation. Not praise in an obvious way, but subtle confirmation. Signs that you're doing the right thing. Reassurance that you're seen. Feedback that tells you to keep going. When that disappears, the mind panics because it has been trained to move only when affirmed. Before this phase, validation acted like fuel. A message, a reaction, progress you could point to. People acknowledging your effort. None of that was wrong, but it was borrowed energy. And borrowed energy runs out. This stage cuts off the supply so you can generate your own. Silence is the training ground. You act now without knowing if anyone approves. You continue without applause. You show up without being recognized. That feels pointless to a mind conditioned by reward, but it's essential for authority. If your movement depends on validation, you are easily redirected, easily discouraged, easily controlled. This stage teaches you how exposed that dependency really was. You begin to notice how often you hesitated, waiting for permission. How often you softened your truth to avoid friction. How frequently you adjusted your pace to match others' comfort. Validation shaped your behavior more than you admitted. When it's removed, your actions feel heavier at first. Not because they're wrong, but because they're finally yours. Moving without validation forces honesty. You can no longer pretend you're committed when no one is watching. You either do the work or you don't. You either follow through or you drift. There is no performance to hide behind. That's why this stage is uncomfortable. It exposes whether your discipline is internal or situational. Over time, something important shifts. You stop checking whether your choices are being approved. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't walking your path. You become less reactive to opinions because they no longer power your momentum. That doesn't make you stubborn. It makes you self-directed. This is how internal authority forms. Authority is not confidence in outcomes. It's confidence in decision-making. The ability to choose and move without needing reassurance that the choice will work out. This stage trains that, by denying you external signals, you learn to assess, decide, and commit without emotional hand-holding. Many people fail here because they mistake discomfort for error. They assume the absence of validation means they're wrong, so they retreat. They abandon progress not because it's incorrect, but because it's lonely. This stage asks you to tolerate that loneliness long enough to outgrow the need for permission. And once that happens, your energy changes. You move slower but cleaner. You speak less, but with precision. You stop advertising your intentions and start embodying them. You become harder to influence because you are no longer scanning for approval. When validation finally returns, it doesn't hook you the same way. You can accept it without relying on it, appreciate it without chasing it, use it without being owned by it. This stage is not making you invisible. It is making you independent, and independence is what allows you to build something real without collapsing when no one is watching. 6. The old path had to collapse. If the old path could still carry you, it wouldn't have broken beneath you. That's the part people resist accepting. They want to believe things fell apart because of bad timing, bad luck, or someone else's mistake. That explanation is comforting, but it's incomplete. The truth is harsher and more useful. The old structure was no longer strong enough for what you were becoming. This stage does not gently redirect. It shuts things down. Opportunities dry up. relationships fracture, plans stall beyond repair. Not because you lacked effort, but because effort alone cannot stretch a structure past its capacity. You were trying to evolve inside a container that had already reached its limit. Collapse was the only way out. Most people cling to old paths because they are familiar, not because they are aligned. Familiarity feels like safety, even when it's shrinking you. This stage removes that illusion by making the familiar unlivable. You can't go back, not because you're forbidden, but because you've outgrown the space. The collapse feels personal because identity was tied to the path, who you were dependent on, where you were going. When that direction vanished, your sense of self shook with it. But that doesn't mean you lost direction. It means direction is no longer being outsourced to a single plan. This stage forces you to stop defining yourself by outcomes and start defining yourself by capacity. Old paths collapse when they demand you stay smaller. They rely on versions of you that were more agreeable, more flexible, more willing to compromise truth for stability. As you grew, tension increased. You felt it before things fell apart. The exhaustion, the quiet resentment, the sense that you were carrying something that no longer fit. Collapse is what happens when that tension reaches its limit. This stage also breaks the fantasy of continuity. People assume progress is linear, step to step, year to year. This phase shows you that real growth often requires rupture. You don't transition smoothly from one life to another. You shed one, and shedding is violent because it involves loss of certainty, not loss of potential. What's being cleared is not possibility, but attachment to a narrow future. The old path promised predictability. It offered a script. Follow these steps, and you'll arrive somewhere recognizable. But predictability caps expansion. This stage removes the script, so you're forced to operate from principles instead of plans. That feels chaotic until you realize it's also flexible. There's something else happening here that most people miss. Collapse removes negotiation. When paths close completely, you stop bargaining with the past. You stop asking, what if I try harder? Or what if I wait longer? The answer becomes clear. This chapter is finished. That clarity hurts, but it frees enormous energy that was previously stuck in indecision. Once you accept that the old path is gone, movement becomes cleaner. You stop dragging dead weight forward. You stop rebuilding what already failed. You stop measuring progress by outdated standards. You begin constructing from current reality instead of nostalgic expectation. This stage doesn't end with a new map. It ends with a new way of navigating. The old path had to collapse because it could not hold the person you're becoming, and what you build next will be stronger precisely because it was not inherited. 7. What emerges after this is untouchable. By the time you reach this point, something fundamental has changed, even if you can't fully articulate it yet. You are no longer the same person who entered this stage, not because life became easier, but because you stopped needing it to be. That shift is subtle, but it's irreversible. What emerges after this stage is not louder, flashier, or more impressive on the surface. It is steadier, and steadiness is dangerous in a world built on reaction. You no longer rush to fix discomfort. You no longer chase clarity through noise. You no longer interpret every setback as a personal failure. You respond instead of react. That alone separates you from most people. This stage leaves behind a person who is internally anchored. You've seen what happens when identities collapse. You've survived isolation without outsourcing your stability. You've endured pressure without surrendering integrity. You've released attachment without becoming bitter. You've learned to move without validation. You've watched an old path dissolve and didn't chase it back. Each of those experiences stripped something fragile and replaced it with something solid. What's left cannot be easily shaken because it no longer depends on conditions. You stop needing constant reassurance that you're okay. You don't require life to cooperate, to maintain composure. Praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't derail you. That emotional independence is not coldness, it's maturity. It means your sense of self is no longer at the mercy of circumstances. This is where quiet authority is born. You don't need to announce who you are. You don't need to convince anyone. Your decisions carry weight because they are not impulsive. They are considered, grounded, and consistent. People feel that, not because you demand respect, but because you no longer seek approval. This version of you moves differently. You choose your battles. You protect your energy. You stop explaining your process to people who haven't earned context. You understand that not everyone needs access to you. Boundaries become natural, not defensive. Silence becomes strategic, not awkward. Most importantly, you stop fearing loss. You've already lost what you thought defined you and discovered that you remained intact. That experience changes your relationship with risk. You are no longer paralyzed by the possibility of things falling apart because you know you can survive the fallout. That makes you difficult to control and impossible to intimidate. This is why this stage was meant to break you. Not to destroy you, but to remove everything that made you breakable. Dependence, attachment, illusions, external authority, fragile identity. All of it had to go. What remains is not invincible, but it is resilient. It bends without shattering. It adapts without losing shape. It stands without leaning. And once you reach this point, you don't go back. You don't return to the old hunger for validation. You don't rebuild the old attachments. You don't chase the old paths. You move forward with fewer words, clearer intent, and deeper control. This is the outcome most people never reach because they quit when the breaking begins. You stayed. You endured. You let the process finish its work. And what emerges after that is untouchable. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing can take you away from yourself again. If you're still standing at the end of this stage, understand this clearly and without romanticizing it. You were not spared because you were lucky. You were pressed because you were capable. Life does not apply this kind of pressure to people it expects to collapse permanently. It applies it to those who can be reshaped. You were not being delayed. You were being recalibrated. Everything that fell away did so because it could not make the next transition with you. What survived did so because it was essential. That distinction matters. Do not rush to explain this phase to people who haven't lived it. Do not seek validation for what you've endured. The proof is already inside you, in your composure, in your restraint, in your ability to move forward without needing reassurance. This stage ends quietly. There is no announcement, no applause, just a deep internal knowing that you are no longer who you were, and you are no longer afraid of becoming who you need to be. Stay disciplined, stay grounded, stay honest. What comes next will not break you, because what could be broken has already been removed.